And without that, of course, there is no membership issue to be discussed. We need to ensure that Ukraine prevails. That's an absolute minimum for Ukraine to become a member of the alliance. We welcome, of course, ad hoc voluntary contributions. They have made a huge difference. But the longer this war lasts, the more important it is that we have more predictability, more accountability, and also fairer burden sharing. And if we turn this into not voluntary contributions, but NATO commitments, of course, it will become more robust, it will become more reliable.
This is my video update on this Thursday, midday, June the 13th. Let's talk about some news, and let's start things off with a report from the Associated Press, which claims that the G7 leaders have agreed to lend Ukraine billions backed by Russia's frozen assets. Here's how it will work. So the Associated Press, citing French officials who were in on these talks, claim that the G7 will announce that they have agreed to loan Ukraine $50 billion. Actually, according to the Associated Press, the United States will put up most of this money as a loan to Ukraine, 50 billion USD, and this loan will be backed by the profits from the Russian frozen assets located in Brussels at Euroclear. So the G7 meeting is taking place today in Italy. It will last until the 15th. And then most of the leaders, not Professor Biden, but most of the leaders at the G7 will then get on a train, plane, or an automobile, and they will go to Switzerland to attend the Swiss Peace/Loser Summit. But that's going to be the big announcement for the G7, a 50 billion loan to Project Ukraine. Just 2 months ago, the US gave 61 billion to Project Ukraine. And yesterday, Ursula announced that the EU will give 1.5 billion to Project Ukraine by the end of the month. The grift does not end. This grift will not end. And the main purpose of this loan, from what I've been reading, is to make it so that Project Ukraine is Trump-proof. The fear is that if Trump wins the elections in November, he may stop the funding to Project Ukraine. He may end the conflict entirely. Who knows? But that's the fear. They're afraid that Trump is going to win in November, and the money will stop flowing to Project Ukraine. So they have structured it in a way that this is going to be a loan, and Trump cannot do anything about this loan. He cannot stop it. 50 billion will be given to Ukraine in the next few months. I think the AP said that definitely by the end of the year, they're going to get this 50 billion to Project Ukraine. And the 200 billion in Europe, well, they still can't get to the 200 billion because there are obvious legal issues, as well as the fear from EU finance ministers that if they just outright steal the 200 billion, then it's going to spook a lot of investors who have their money in the EU, and they're going to pull it out. So what they've done is they have now made it so that if you have money in Europe, then the interest, the profit that your money, your investment in Europe generates can now be confiscated and given to a third party. In this case, it's Ukraine. It could be something else in a different case, but they have now made it so that if you have money in the European Union generating interest, generating a profit, the collective West, the European Union, can now take those profits and redistribute them to whoever they want. The profits that your investment is generating effectively do not belong to you. That is what has just happened. This is a really, really bad move. But there you have it. So the Associated Press says in this article, towards the end of this article, that there's one last detail connected to this loan. And the question, the detail is, who would be on the hook in case of a default? And when you read this article, you begin to understand that the U.S. is going to structure this loan in a way that puts the European Union on the hook if there happens to be a default with this $50 billion loan to Ukraine. If, for example, I'm not saying this is going to happen, this is probably very, very unlikely that this is going to happen, but what if? What if Ukraine does not win this conflict with Russia? What if Russia just happens to win? A very, very small chance that Russia happens to win. Then what happens with this $50 billion loan to Ukraine? Well, the European Union will most likely be on the hook, and they will have to pay back this loan to the United States. But you know, I don't think the European Union has anything to worry about. Zelensky's going to pull off the victory. I'm 99.999% sure of that. Who's going to bet against Volodymyr Zelensky? Yeah, so that's the one question mark. But rumor has it that the EU is going to be on the hook if for some strange reason Ukraine just doesn't pay back the loan. But trust me, Ukraine is good for it. Europe, America, Ukraine is good for the 50 billion. Absolutely. And when Ukraine burns through the 50 billion, there'll be another 50 billion loan. And then when they burn through that 50 billion, and they're going to burn through the 50 billion very quickly, there'll be another 50 billion loan. And when they burn through that 50 billion, there'll be another 50 billion loan. And all of this is going to be backed by the profits from the Russian frozen assets. Oh boy. It is incredible to watch the collective West, the United States, the European Union destroy themselves on the hill that is called Project Ukraine. Destroy their financial system, destroy their currency for Ukraine. The United States is doing all of this for Ukraine. Self-destruction for Project Ukraine, a country that the United States has no historical, cultural, linguistic, geographic connection to. Zero. It really is unbelievable. You know, a rational group of grifters, you know what they would have said? They would have said, you know what? We had a good run in Ukraine. We had a really good run for 10, maybe even 20 years. You can make the argument. For 20 years, we've been making bank off of Project Ukraine, and the American people had no idea how much money we were making from Ukraine. Our kids were making 80,000 euros a month, pretending to be energy experts, sitting on the boards of companies that the average citizen had no clue about. For 2 decades, we were doing super well, and it was all under the radar. No one had any clue what was going on. So Putin decides to go in, No problem. We're out. It was a good run. It was a good run. Let's move on to the next grift. That's what a rational group of grifters would have done. But nope, not this group. Not this group. They doubled and tripled and quadrupled down on Project Ukraine, and they're trying to take more and more and more money from Project Ukraine. Unbelievable stuff. Anyway, let's move on, and let's talk about the U.S. sanctions. So Janet Yellen, she announced more U.S. sanctions against Russia, and a lot of this stuff that's coming out now against Russia, the $50 billion loan, the announcement of sanctions. The Biden White House, by the way, they are going to sign a security deal with Ukraine, a 10-year security deal in Italy during the G7. A lot of this is just about putting up a front to Russia, to the world, to show that you're still supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes. Don't worry, Zelensky. Don't worry. We're not abandoning you just yet. We're not throwing you under the bus just yet. Here's a $50 billion loan. Here's sanctions against Russia, and here's a security deal. A lot of this is just smoke and mirrors, and it's all being timed ahead of the G7 meeting in Italy. But Janet Yellen, she announced a whole lot of sanctions that are going to have minimal to zero effect on Russia, because Russia has proven that it is sanctions proof. And Yellen announced that the U.S. is going to be sanctioning something like 300 entities in the technology, IT, and financial banking sphere. Sberbank and VTB are going to be sanctioned again. I don't know. I think they were sanctioned before. Now they're going to be sanctioned again. I'm not sure what's going on. And basically any other banks that decide to work with these two big Russian banks, they face the risk of secondary sanctions. And the Moscow Stock Exchange was sanctioned, and this caused the Moscow Stock Exchange to suspend trading in dollars and euros. And yeah, that's the sanctions. The Russian government, they came out with a statement saying, we're going to retaliate. Yes, we're going to retaliate. We cannot leave this unanswered. But we're sanctions proof. I mean, we've learned to live with sanctions. We've learned to adapt with sanctions. And more importantly, the Russian government has said we have learned to thrive with sanctions. So I imagine that these latest sanctions will lead to Russia's growth in 2025 hitting, I don't know what, 7%, 8%, from 5% to like 7 or 8%. Who knows? But look, the big story was the Moscow Stock Exchange suspending trading in dollars and euros. From what I understand, this is not going to affect the actual over-the-counter activity of euros and dollars in Russia. This is just confined to the stock exchange. And it sounds to me like this is more de-dollarization. That's the way it looks to me. Maybe it's going to cause some discomfort and disruption in Russia and in Moscow City, in the financial world for a little bit, but Russia will adapt. And no more dollars, no more euros, more de-dollarization. And other countries are going to look on and they're going to say, maybe we should curb our use of USD and euros. Maybe we're going to be next. Maybe our stock exchanges should see what's happening in Russia and adapt. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, that's the announcement from the United States. A security deal, a 10-year security deal is what Biden's going to sign. A meaningless security deal. Basically, a security deal is that the United States will provide weapons and money to Ukraine for 10 years. And I think the goal of this deal is to try and make it Trump-proof as well, so that the money and the weapons can continue to flow to Ukraine, even if Trump becomes president, or if anybody, any administration that comes into office, they won't be able to cancel this deal, at least for 10 years. So they're basically making it so that for 10 years, they can continue the grift, and the military-industrial complex can continue to make bank off of weapons to Project Ukraine. The EU is trying to put together new sanctions as well, because if the US puts together sanctions, well, we have to put sanctions together too. But they're having a hard time with their sanctions. I think this is sanctions package number 14 or 15 or 415, which will lead to more growth in the Russian economy. But hey, why not? Let's just keep those sanctions coming. The more you sanction Russia, the more Russia prospers. That's the equation. That's the Annalena math equation. The more you sanction Russia, the more Russia grows and prospers. So yeah, this time around, it's not Hungary that's blocking the implementation of the next EU sanctions package. It's actually Germany, and it's Pirate Schultz, because it looks like these sanctions are going to further damage German businesses. And Schultz is sweating, man. Schultz is sweating like I'm sweating here in 42-degree humid Greece. Schultz is sweating a lot more than I'm sweating. Yeah, he's like, God, more businesses are going to be leaving Germany, more recession. Even Schultz is saying enough. Enough. We have to do something so that the German economy stops imploding. That's basically what Schultz is saying with this sanctions package. So the EU, they'll figure something out. They'll put together a sanctions package, because whatever the US does, the EU has to do it as well. And as I said, this sanctions package, whatever the EU puts together, sanctions against Russia will help Russia grow even more and will make Russia even stronger. So the sanctions really are working, just in a reverse effect. So Stoltenberg, he was speaking the other day about Ukraine entering NATO, and Stoltenberg, he said that Ukraine, to enter NATO, they must defeat Russia. That's pretty much what Stoltenberg said. In order for Ukraine to enter NATO, they must defeat Russia. I expect that allies will actually make important announcements between now and the summit, and also at the summit for more military equipment, which is urgently needed to ensure that Ukraine prevails as a sovereign, independent nation, Stoltenberg told reporters during a meeting at defense ministers in Brussels. And without that, of course, there is no membership issue to be discussed. We need to ensure that Ukraine prevails. That's an absolute minimum for Ukraine to become a member of the alliance. There you have it, Ukraine. Continue to destroy yourself in order for you to eventually enter NATO. That's the deal. You have to destroy yourself in order to become part of NATO. Destroy yourself to the point where there's nothing left. There's nothing left of Ukraine, but that nothing can become a NATO member. Incredible stuff. Incredible admission from Stoltenberg. Stoltenberg also said, when he was speaking to reporters, that he wants to move NATO, the NATO business, from a voluntary donations model to a mandatory subscription-based model. Because NATO, at the end of the day, is a business. I've been saying this for many, many years. NATO is a business. That's it. It's just a business. And their latest revenue stream, their latest product is called Project Ukraine. And Stoltenberg, he said that it's great that our new product, Project Ukraine, receives voluntary donations. He said, that's great. We're not complaining. And we've gotten a lot of money from voluntary donations, so no complaints. But if you're running a business, you know that that donations are good, but what you really want is you want a steady, predictable revenue stream. And there's nothing better than subscriptions, a monthly or a yearly payment, right? And that's what Stoltenberg is arguing for. He wants NATO member states to contribute every year a mandatory amount. They have to put money into Ukraine, not NATO. They also have to put money into NATO, but also into Project Ukraine. Every year, a mandatory amount. That's a good revenue model, right? That's a good revenue model. That's a good business. So that's what Stoltenberg is pushing for. Predictable, mandatory, subscription-based model for NATO's latest product called Project Ukraine. It is a business. So there's trouble in Brussels at the European Union with Ursula von der Crazy and Charles Michel. Rumor has it that Michel and Ursula do not get along, and that Michel, who is, from what I understand, he's responsible for appointing many of the positions in the European Union, all the new positions that are going to be appointed in the European Union, because the European Union is a democracy, and in any healthy democracy, all of the top positions are appointed, right? It's just how democracies work, appointed by some guy named Charles Michel. Anyway, he's gathering up council members and staff, and they're discussing who they're going to appoint to the top positions in the European Union. And rumor has it that Charles Michel does not want Ursula sitting in on those meetings. EU countries want to exclude van der Leyen from parts of the special summit. And from the Daily Express, EU cracks begin to show as Ursula von der Leyen faces being banned from meetings. And the reason that Charles Michel and Ursula do not get along, according to these reports, goes all the way back to when Charles Michel and Ursula traveled to Turkey and they met with Erdogan and Sofagate. Remember that incident? And Erdogan, he had a seat for himself, and next to him he had one chair, and then he had sofas way out on the other side of the room. And Charles Michel, he decided, hey, I'm going to sit right here next to Erdogan. And Ursula just stood there, and she was like, what? What are you doing? I'm the commission president. I should sit next to Erdogan. And Charles Michel just plopped down, just sat right next to Erdogan and was like, yep, I'm the leader of the EU. And Ursula was like, no, I'm the leader of the EU. Anyway, Ursula was vanquished to one of the sofas, and Michel and Erdogan, they did business. And rumor has it that ever since that event, Ursula has been very upset with Michel, and Michel has been very dismissive of Ursula. And now Michel, he is trying to freeze out Ursula from the EU meetings, where many of the important decisions and appointments for various positions are going to be made. So trouble in Brussels. I was going to say trouble in paradise, but the EU, Brussels, HQ is definitely not trouble in paradise. Anyway, let's do one more story, then we'll get to the clown world, a couple more stories, and then we'll get to today's clown world. So what's going to be the country that's going to follow Ukraine? What's going to be the next disaster country waiting to happen after Project Ukraine? Taiwan, China, that incident, is that going to be the next flare-up? Georgia appears to be moving out of the danger zone. Armenia, that looks like it could be the next region, the next country, the next area to face Project Ukraine collapse. It looks like it might be Armenia, maybe even before China, Taiwan faces off against the United States. And I say this because Pashinyan yesterday in the parliament, he announced that Armenia is pulling out of the CSTO, the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Armenia will leave the CSTO, Pashinyan told Parliament on Wednesday. Yerevan is seeking to improve ties with Western powers amid strained relations with Moscow. The timeline of the withdrawal has yet to be determined, Pashinyan noted, adding, "We will decide when we go out." The Armenian premier also stated that he did not want to make such an announcement prematurely and maintained that Yerevan won't go back to full CSTO membership and that there is no other way but to leave. We predicted this on the Duran about a year ago, that Pashinyan, he effectively, I don't know if the right word is engineered, but he maneuvered, maybe that's the right word, the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh in order to offload Nagorno-Karabakh and open up the path for Armenia to enter the European Union, or to move towards the European Union and to move towards NATO. And he did that. And now he is pulling out of the CSTO so that he could start to integrate Armenia into the collective West. That was Pashinyan's plan all along, and he has taken one step closer to achieving this plan. When he announced that Armenia was going to be leaving the CSTO, there were protests in Parliament. There was a fight in Parliament, and there were protests in the streets. People understand that if Armenia leaves the CSTO, they are in big trouble, because it is Russia and the CSTO that protects Armenia from Azerbaijan. And the moment that Armenia leaves the CSTO, it is believed that Azerbaijan will strike again, and this time they will reach the enclave of Nakhchivan, right? Which is this enclave located on the border of Iran and a little bit on the border with Turkey. And it's this enclave that's a part of Azerbaijan, but not connected to Azerbaijan proper, something like that. And Armenia separates Azerbaijan from this enclave. And the analysis, the thinking is that once Armenia loses the protection of Russia and the CSTO, then it opens up the way for Azerbaijan to sweep through the path that separates Nakhchivan from Azerbaijan, and to connect these areas, which would leave Armenia to be just Yerevan and a little bit of the regions surrounding Yerevan. A disaster for Armenia is coming, courtesy of Pashinyan. So that was the news out of Armenia. Let's see, Business Insider. We're heading into clown world territory. Business Insider, they put out an article with the title, "Putin could struggle to end the war in Ukraine because it's making some poor Russians richer." Russia's war against Ukraine has made some poor Russians better off, complicating any calculus over how to end it. Basically, this article is trying, in a very clumsy way, it's trying to say that Russia is in a war economy and poorer Russians have benefited from this war economy, and it's going to be difficult for Putin to wind down the war because so many people have benefited from this war economy. And when he does wind down the war, then these poorer Russians are going to be very upset with Putin, and this could be a danger for the Putin administration. That's basically the argument that Business Insider is trying to make, but they do it in a very clumsy way. But that's the article from Business Insider. The war has made poor Russians richer, and basically they don't want the war to end because they've made money from the war economy. And a point that we have argued on the Duran many, many times, that Russia is not anywhere close to being a war economy. not remotely close to being a war economy. Has spending increased on the military side of things? Yes, but not to any dangerous levels. And not only has it not increased to a level where you can actually say Russia's a war economy, Putin, in his appointment of the new defense minister, Belousov, he is addressing the increase in spending in the military by appointing someone who will be very effective in keeping the costs down while keeping the military production ramped up and making sure that whatever is developed in the military sphere also has a commercial use. So Putin is addressing the increase in military spending, but by no means, by no stretch of the imagination, has the spending reached a level where you could say that it's a war economy. I believe Alexander said that Germany during World War II, something like 40 or 50% of its economic spending was on the military. Russia, from what I understand, is at maybe 6 or 7%, something like that. So, I mean, you're talking about a huge way to go before you could say this is a war economy. Anyway, what else? Slovakia. Former Slovak Defense Minister Jaroslav Nagy will be involved in a treason case due to the transfer of MiG-29 fighters to Ukraine, stated by the current head of the military department, Robert Kalinyak. That's something, huh? The former defense minister is in big trouble because he transferred weapons to Ukraine, and according to the current Fico government, this was treason. This was illegal. So we'll see what will happen there. And let's do some clown worlds. How about this photo of David Cameron? I forgot what event he was at recently, but David Cameron was talking about Russia and Project Ukraine and continuing to support Project Ukraine and Crimea and the UK's obsession with Crimea. And he's holding up this shirt with somebody, I don't know who this is, which says, "Make Russia pay 300 billion. Yep. Steal the 300 billion, collective West, and watch your economies collapse. Steal the 300 billion and watch your economies collapse. The eye of Sauron. The eye of Sauron." So that's David Cameron. How about Bukele? I don't know when this video took place, when this happened, but Bukele burned, the El Salvador president burned 2.7 tons of coke, which was confiscated by authorities, valued at 67.5 million. I don't know if this is a recent video. I don't even know if this is a real incident of burning coke that took place. I don't know. I've just seen this video all over social media, and so I figured I will put this in my clown world for today. Bukele burning the white sugary stuff. I hope this video doesn't reach a certain green t-shirt wearing Ukrainian citizen. I really hope he doesn't see this video. What is this? What is this? What is this El Salvador guy doing, Podolyak? Turn it off, Podolyak. I can't watch. I can't watch. Oh, boy. Just joking. Just joking. And finally, we have this story. Madonna supports the Global Peace Summit in Switzerland and calls to protect Ukrainian children from Russia. That's right. You know, when a peace summit has the endorsement of Madonna, yeah, you're winning. When Madonna endorses you, you know you're on the right side of history. Switzerland Peace Summit. Anyway, that's the video, everybody. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop, Football 24, to pick up football merch. Take care.